Okay, fiber friends, we are now ready to actually cast on. I'm sure you're sick of seeing this view with the unused yarn. We're going to get into it. We are starting our project. There is nothing stopping us. So we have our pattern. And again, if you want to knit along or if you want to knit this at some point in the future, go ahead and grab the pattern from Andrea's website or Ravelry if you use it, and that's all linked below. This is not sponsored in any way. Again, this is just, I love her patterns. I learned to knit off a bunch of them, and this is what I'm choosing to do. We have our swatch, so we know exactly what we're going to, or how the finished item is going to turn out. And if you want to go back and watch the other videos, you can see all the prep and thought that went into it. We have our needles. Right now I have the 3.75 millimeter, which is, I need to read this, a US 5, because that's the size down. So you go down usually 2 needle sizes for your ribbing. And that's where we're starting because we're going to start at the bottom. We know it's a bottom up knit. She says that in the pattern intro, so that's not a spoiler. And then we'll switch to our 4.5 millimeter needles and we'll be knitting a size 4 to get the finish measurement that we think we want that will fit our body best and suit us just fine. So 3.75 millimeter needles, and then I'll switch them to the 4.5. We've got our swatch, we've got our needles, we've got our size, we've got our yarn. The one thing that I did promise to do in one of the earlier videos in this series where we're talking through the whole process is to show you how you take a skein of yarn that looks like this. It's also called a hank in this form. This is a hank, this kind of twisty thing, but most people just call it a skein or skein. Some people say it differently. I say skein. It's potato, if you will. But I'm going to actually show you how I cake it up because I'm going to make sure that my first color after the ribbing is ready. Again, this will be the main color, and I already have a cake of it from when I did my swatches. But we're going to actually wind this into a cake like this. Not the prettiest one I've ever done, but whatever. And then we can actually get started, and I will actually cast on the first few stitches at least. This is not a knitting tutorial by any means, but it's just to show you how we go from this to something we can use, and then how we go from that into actually casting on our project. So the one thing that I do recommend doing before you actually start knitting is read through the pattern, at least read through the first few steps to understand where you're starting, what you're going to be doing. So in our case, we're going to be starting with the bottom ribbing, and then we're going to be working our way up the body, and then we're going to attach the sleeves after, and then we're going to do this sort of collar band. So those are the general steps. Make sure you know what cast on you're doing. There are multiple kinds with lots of different names. And that's all just helpful to make sure that you're aware of what's coming up before you get there, because sometimes you make mistakes or sometimes you make assumptions and they're wrong. So it happens to all of us all the time. So I recommend giving it a look through, and then if you're ever confused, I recommend looking at people's project photos in Ravelry if you are on Ravelry, because a lot of people will show projects sort of in that work in progress stage, or search up the hashtag that they give you for the pattern on Instagram or something so that you can see other people's work in progress, and that might help you figure out something if you're stuck on it. But without further ado, I'm going to pause this video with my very fancy pause feature, and then because I'm super high tech, and then I'm going to just zoom out a little bit so that you can see what's going on, and I will actually start winding this so we can see it, and then I will cast on, and that is going to be this video. Okay, so I think this is as good as our view is going to get. Again, we're not high-tech production value. We're not editing, nothing like that. So I'm going to take my yarn skein, and this will work for anything that's in a hank form. I'm going to snip off the tag, but I save the tag, and I'll show you where I put it. I get rid of the little connectors here because I don't need that. I have my umbrella Swift, which again, this is like the cheapest you can get on Amazon because my big beautiful wooden one broke and I want to be frugal in the replacement. It's not sturdy and solid, but it will do the trick. It was about 20 bucks Canadian. And then this is a Stanwood ball winder, which is a slightly more expensive plastic one on Amazon. but the quality is much better than the cheaper plastic ones. I've had a cheap plastic one break. I also had one from Michael's that just wasn't good for making bigger cakes, which is what it's called when we wind it over here. So I'm going to take my skein, which is in this hank form, which it just twisted on itself, and I'm just going to open it up, which means pull it out of where it's twisted, let it unravel itself, and it will be in a beautiful, easy to open up circle like this. And then I use my umbrella swift. You can also use someone else's hands. You can use the upside down back of a chair or a stool. Doesn't have to be an upside down chair, by the way. This is going to be really awkward because I'm like around the camera. But what I like about an umbrella swift is you just expand it out like that. And now I've got all of this and it's going to turn. Let me move my plant out of the way. It's going to turn while I turn the handle here and make it really easy for me to wind it into a cake. Then I find my yarn ends that are securing this skein together and making it so it doesn't get a big tangled mess. And I snip them and pull them out. And sometimes they'll be attached to the actual yarn ends that will start and end. Like this one, it has 4 strands. Oh, it's not on camera. There we go. It has 4 strands here. That means I've got 1 strand that covers 2 strands actually wrapping around to secure it. And I've got the start of the actual yarn itself. So I need to then pull it out. So there's the one that was securing it. And then I've got my yarn ends here. So I've got 1 and 1. And this is where I'm actually going to start pulling it over to my ball winder. You just kind of thread this around and then you stick this. There's like a crack. There's slots at the top that you can put your yarn end through so that you can center pull from the ball if that's what you like to do. It's not my preference. I like to pull from the outside, but this will let you center pull, which I think is great. By the way, how nice is this palette without the gold too? I'm not going to go there, but I'm just saying that's a beautiful combo. So this is Frosted Stitches Grunge Collection, Docks, Courtney, Seether, and Angst. And that, my friends, is a moody, gorgeous palette. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start turning the handle, which you can't really see. It's just in the bottom corner here. Turning the handle, and the swift is automatically turning. Like my hand's up here, I'm not doing anything. It's automatically turning and it's going to make it into a cake. And sometimes you get a little bit of resistance, but this one's going very, very well. And all I'm going to do is keep doing this until I have a full cake. You don't need to stay for this part because it's going to be a little boring. So I'm going to use my fancy high-tech pause feature and we will be back when I have my full cake and we'll cast on. Okay, and we are back and we have just finished. You can see the last little bit has come off the umbrella swift and is popping in there for this absolutely gorgeous cake, much better than my swatch cake. And then what I usually do is I keep my yarn tag for whatever the yarn is, the label, the thing you pull off it or whatever. And I like to just fold it in half so it's nice and small. And then I just set it here on top and then I pop the cake up and off and there we have it. And what I like about a cake, because lots of people ask like what's the point of a cake versus a ball versus other stuff, what I like about a cake is that it's going to sit and it's not really going to roll around because it does kind of have that flat rounded shape. It's not a ball that can kind of roll around all over the place. I like to work from the outside. Lots of people like to work from the inside. If so, you can just pull up that center pull ball, that center pull piece that was attached at the start. And you can probably still find it if you want to, or if you want to work from both ends. But this is a beautiful cake and a great way. I'm not starting with this. I hope I haven't been confusing. This is my second color. I just want to make sure that I have it ready so that when I get to the end of my ribbing and switch to my main needles, I can do this without having to have my swift, because I may not be around today that I'm filming this. It's Friday. I may not be around on Saturday or Sunday or near my swift and ball winder. So I'm just going to show you that I can just, put this down and it condenses right down. That's nice. Now I'm going to pause while I zoom in and get ready to actually cast on. Okay, so this feels like a big moment, right? This feels like we've done all this prep work, so much effort to make sure that we're going to be happy with the finished result. And now we actually get to start doing the damn thing. Can I say that on here? Yeah, of course I can. Okay. Now, I showed when I'm in my swatching video, so if you go back in the playlist, you can find it, my way of making sure I have enough of a yarn tail for my cast on. I'm going to show you a couple cast on stitches, but again, this is not a knit along where I'm going to sit and knit on my YouTube channel. I'm going to be knitting when I'm all over the place. I like to travel and knit in the car, not while driving, of course. I like to sit outside and knit, sit in my hammock, like all sorts of things. So I'm not going to be knitting it on YouTube, and it's also not going to be any details that will give away pattern information, because you need to buy the pattern in order to knit the pattern and support those designers. So I am going to show you the long tail cast on, which is the most straightforward, I think, and basic cast on that most people learn. And I'm about to do it now, and I'll just show you a couple, and I have the yarn already worked out, so I know that that yarn tail is going to be enough for the number of stitches, which I will not disclose because guess what? We're not giving away pattern details here. Okay, so I'm going to start with my slip knot. For a slip knot, I bring the yarn from the front to the back on the needle, and then I grab, this is called working yarn, which is attached to the ball. I grab my working yarn from behind and then bring it back to front, and then I pull that loop over. There are a million tutorials on slip knots, and there's all sorts of different ways to do it. That's what I do. And then for my long tail cast on, what I've got is I've got my working yarn. Actually, I usually like to have my working yarn like here. I know it probably doesn't actually matter, but working yarn here, yarn tail over here. I grab them with my back two fingers, so my ring finger and my pinky. And then I split them open like this. Okay, so I got my thumb is on my working yarn that's attached here. My index finger has my yarn tail attached over there. And I just spread them out like this. And then I'm flipping it over so that my thumb is like this. I'm taking my needle and going from behind and lifting up that front one, going around this guy and back through that needle or that hole, and boom. I'm sure there are people who actually teach knitting who will do a very good job of demonstrating this for you. But this is the long tail cast on, and it's called that, I'm sure, for some reason that has something to do with that long yarn tail pile you see over there. But once you get the hang of it, you can be very quick with it. And the goal is to be quite consistent with how tightly you pull after. So this is what I found is after you do this part where you let it go and you pull it in, being consistent with that will make sure the clean edge is really clean and consistent. Otherwise you might have some looser bumps and some tighter areas. So really the trick is when you're doing that pull, you be consistent. And I'm not tugging on it, I'm not making it tight, but I am not letting it be loose, because when it's loose, if it's a little too loose like that, I just give it an extra little, that's the official term for it, the. So that's it. I have now started this sweater. You've officially stuck with me, and we have cast this on in what probably felt like a really long series of videos, because they were long. I don't edit them, all that jazz, but the fun part is now that I've done this, I'm going to just do a whole bunch of knitting. I will probably come in, the next one I'll come in will be hopefully when I change colors. And again, it will really depend where I am and if I can set up some sort of recording. It may not be in this spot that I've been in the whole time, but I will hopefully check in when we change colors after the ribbing is complete. We're doing the ribbing first, which is that bottom hem at the bottom of the sweater. And then we'll start striping. And then after that, there's like things like, you know, placing the pocket, which is fun. And then after that, it's just keep going with the stripes until you get up to the body. And we will be knitting flat. So it's knit flat. So we're going to go back and forth. So we're going to do knits, and then we're going to do purls on the wrong side, knits on the right side, purls on the wrong side. And that's called stockinette stitch. So sometimes, like when I was a beginner knitter, figuring out that knitting it with the standard fabric that I was used to seeing, which looks like this, was actually knitting on this side and purling on that side. And you would be surprised how long it took me to catch on to that. And so this is just little helpful tidbits. But again, if you want to learn more about a long tail cast on, you can use that term to search it up. If you want to learn about how to knit this fabric flat, you use the term stockinette stitch and you'll be able to figure it out. It's got the bumpy purls on the back and the nice flat smooth V's on the front. And it's probably the most standard sort of fabric stitch. If you want to look up this yarn, I've got links below. If you want to look up the pattern, I've got links below. If you want to connect with me on Instagram to see like shots of my stories, I'm a stories person. I will make sure I put stuff in stories much more than I'll post on grids. So if you want to follow along, it's the same username. And I hope to see you guys here, see some comments, hopefully, that I can answer if people have questions about this sort of initial planning phase that we are now out of. We are in now the building phase where we will knit it, and then we'll get to the finishing stage, which will be a whole other series of things that we're doing, steps we're doing at the end. And hopefully I'll end up with a really beautiful, well-fit, well-made garment rather than the Douglas Carty that I have previously knit, which is in the intro video. And I have a link to my Ravelry page for that. If you use Ravelry, you can also find it on my grid on Instagram if you want to go scroll through to see it. It's kind of similar color tones, but wrong yarn, wrong gauge, wrong tension, wrong size. It was like everything wrong, and I still wear it and love it, but I'm going to love this one so much more because I've learned so much along the way. So I hope you have, some good whips going. I wish you very happy crafting, and I'm sure I will see you soon with an update. Bye for now.